So, let's see here. Just to kick it off, I'm going to start by asking a question, and then we'll go around in the audience, and TJ is going to come around and raise your hand if you have a question, and you'll get to ask the panel, and they'll answer. So, let's see. We've got some great questions here. How might organizations with remote or distant employees encourage collaboration or spark innovation? Anyone like to start? Let you pass the mic.
Well, I know at SAP we have like 80,000 employees, so we use tools every day. Our teams are all over the place. So we try to use just basic tools like Skype, try to see each other on video because we spend a lot of time on conference calls. So just connecting, using the technology that's there to enable collaboration.
One of my clients, American Express, has people all over the world, and one of the things that we do when we come together around a conference table is there's a series of, in essence, screens, monitors, right? And we see the people sitting where they are as if they're around the table with us. And so it makes it very real time, and we're able to have authentic conversations as a result of that, feeling like we're in the same room with each other, even though nobody had to get on a plane to do it. So that's one thing that comes to mind. And then the second thing that comes to mind is creating a structure for people to have a regular conversation. So a client of mine that's a global company that has people all over the world, and they have different reporting structures, they weren't having a regular conversation. We put in place every Tuesday morning, first thing in the morning, they're talking about what are they doing this week, what have they accomplished, what are the stumbling blocks that are in front of them. Just creating the structure for those conversations to occur regularly made a huge difference in the way that they're now collaborating and innovating with each other.
Great. I think just for us, one of the things that we try and do is if we're going to have an event, if it's Halloween and we're all having a Halloween party, whatever it is that we're doing, we try and have our retail locations or our other remote locations do their own version of that. So it's kind of like, hey, here's the big idea, and then, make with it what works for your environment and business. And so we're all doing the same thing as celebrating the holiday, but we might be doing it in a little bit of a more unique way, depending on our location.
We'll throw some questions in the audience. Don't be shy.
Hi. My question is that in today's fast-paced environment, I think it's very easy to say your calendar is full, you're traveling too much, and innovation is probably one of those things that very quickly goes to the wayside. It's not as important because you're so busy firefighting. Do you have any advice for how to help our populations overcome that mentality?
I'm a big believer that you get 2 hours a day for firefighting and the rest done and over. So it's building your schedule so that you allocate that time for firefighting, and then it rotates to somebody else to take over the firefighting from there.
Yeah, I think time is a big inhibitor for people. Everyone has so much going on. I mean, if people at Google can take 10% of their time to focus on innovation, why can't we all? But maybe it's just blocking your calendar for a period of time and saying that's dedicated to it. And I think part of that is getting your leaders to agree to that and make it okay for employees to do so. Otherwise, no one's going to do it. So I think as HR professionals, sometimes it's about showing them the numbers and giving them the business case behind why innovation is so important, and then suggesting, okay, well, how about we, block an hour on a Friday and give people that time and make it okay.
I think the other thing too is it doesn't have to be separate innovation time. Like, you can think about whatever it is that you're fighting a fire about that day, and then afterwards be like, all right, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen anymore, or what can we do kind of related to the specific issue? And sometimes just any small tweak that you can make there in real time will go a long way, even if it's not a huge innovation idea that has bigger impact.
Anybody else? Hi, my question is for Liz and anybody else that wants to jump in. Given the nature of our university, I as a staff member am allowed to go and volunteer with the students, and I noticed that Liz is part of the social program at SAP where she gets to be involved with a sabbatical, and I was wondering if you might, any of you, talk about how your volunteer work might make you a richer employee in terms of what you're able to do.
Sure. Yes, SAP has a program, a local social sabbatical. So I get to be a consultant for a local nonprofit and spend 6 weeks of my time there. And there's also a global program where you get to go away for 6 weeks to a developing country and help them with a major problem as a consultant. I think for us who are part of the program, it's that we are learning on the job as part of the team. It gives us a new perspective that we can then bring back to our teams. And it's a win-win for both SAP and for the nonprofit. They may be solving a problem, but for us as individuals, we're bringing all of that learning back to our roles. We're feeling refreshed, reinvigorated, and ready to take on new things.
That sounds really great. I think the other part of doing good and thinking about communities outside of your own while on the job is that you then are able to really think about from Warby Parker's perspective, perhaps any other prospective customers out there and what do they want, and actually in real time kind of talking to people and seeing what are their problems and what are their struggles and what could we potentially help them with.
Everybody, this is my wife who has a question for the team.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna get nervous. So diversity is very important nowadays, especially in the innovation process and everything. And as women, we want to grow in our career, we want to have kids, we want to be with our families. So my question is what are companies doing to help us accomplish that? What are the innovating ideas for women to be able to do both?
I'll take it just because I have 4 kids and I can speak to that a little bit, but it's not really that innovative. But I think one of the big things that SAP gives me is someone who balances career and family. And you just it doesn't have to be about kids. It can be about hobbies and friends and just having a life outside of work. It's flexibility. So they trust their employees and give them the flexibility they need to get their job done and trust that they can do it. And that's huge. And I don't think I would be in the position I'm in or the role I'm in if I didn't have that and the ability to get my job done when I need to. So not the most innovative, but helpful.
So at the professional development group, nobody has a set work schedule. And as a result, people can create their schedules based on the projects that they're involved in. That gives parents a tremendous amount of flexibility to do what they need to do. And I'm seeing some organizations adopt that mentality that as long as you get your work done, you can create the schedule that you need to do that. And I think that's key. Another piece for me is encouraging people to live their values. So helping people to identify what their values are. And for some people, they have children, but other people don't have children. So not making it about that and making it more about what do you value and what do you want to bring alive in the world, and how can you utilize your work and our team and these resources enabled to help do that. So that helps to create a sense of balance and purpose in what we're doing. And when we do that, we're much more fulfilled. Yeah.
All right.
I'll beat you.
Hi, how are you? Enjoyed your presentations tonight. So my question is really, I think about what each of you have said. Okay, you work for SAP, you're working for big clients, American Express, you work for Warby Parker. These are big companies. They're very profitable, they're well staffed, they're well equipped. without putting either one of or any of you on the spot, what would you say to a small company, okay, that doesn't have your margin, doesn't have your profitability, doesn't have your infrastructure? They're short-staffed. They're doing firefighting, not 2 hours a day, it's all day. That is historically where 70% of the job growth has come from this country, okay? So my question to you is, what would you honestly say to small companies that have the same issues that the bigger companies have, but they don't have the resources? What would you say to them in terms of how you get their organizational culture and their belief set, okay, aligned and moving forward? Thank you.
And I work with lots of companies like what you just described, small organizations where there may be 6 people or 20 people. And the key there is making sure that we have a sense of what our mission is, what our values are, and that we're aligned around that. And then once we've gotten clear on what our mission and our values, our vision for this organization is, then we build our structure and our staffing and our systems around all of that. And I think for organizations that size, it really is important to do the things that we've been talking about here, because in order to get the best and the brightest to come to work there, we've got to have an advantage for doing so. And there are so many things that smaller companies can give to employees that they can't get in some of the larger companies. So I'm thinking about, for example, a marketing agency that I work with and how they have created an incredibly robust culture. If you're looking for an example of this, check out Altitude Marketing. They have put a stake in the ground about what they want to create and how they want to treat their employees and serve their customers, so that even though they're a small organization, they're doing things to be innovative and support customers in completely new ways. I could give you a list of a few others, but I'd be happy to talk more about that offline. Again, I think it's far more important for smaller companies to be creating a culture of innovation, even than some of these larger ones that we've heard mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. I think setting the vision is important, but I think a culture is a little bit easier to build that's innovative at a smaller company than trying to get 80,000 people around a single belief. So I think that is one advantage, and it's starting small with the small things, making sure, like we said, have the leaders involved and things like that, but it's the little things, and it's that culture that makes a difference.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it starts with the values, and then it's about hiring the right people and giving them the ability to make decisions, trusting them and having them kind of be able to run with what they need to do.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah. I have a question. So each one of you talked about like speaking up or challenging and resistance or offering your ideas even though you're not the leader at the top. And I'm curious, many of our students are just starting out or just going in on internships and just getting their foot in the door at an organization. What advice would you give them on how to challenge the status quo or think innovatively while still being at that bottom rung level? And how can they do that? What would your advice be for them?
I would say find someone that you can trust, that you can talk to, and share your ideas with them first, and just get a sense for what the culture is, what the right place is, what the right time is to share your thoughts and ideas. Most companies hire young people and people with your background and in this program because we want your ideas and we want a fresh perspective. So just don't be afraid to share, because that's really the heart of any culture and driving innovation.
I think you've heard us say before, ask lots of questions and make it safe for people to ask questions. So as interns or as new employees, ask what are the boundaries around the types of questions that I can ask, and can we have a time where I'm able to come and ask several questions? Again, I'm a big believer in setting up the structure to do that. So set up that regular conversation and say, I'm going to come with 3 questions each week, and I'm going to challenge myself to ask different things and to share my perspective. one of the reasons why people will hire you is because they want to know how you're thinking. They want to see through your eyes. And so recognize you have something of value to share, and the types of questions that you ask will give insight into what you're thinking about. I remember something that created a huge breakthrough for me. I heard my boss's boss, when I was in my 20s, say that he didn't have time to read the popular business books at that time. And it clicked with me. He's saying something here. I said, what are the business books that you would like to read? And he made a list of 3 or 4 of them, and I said, I'll read them and I'll summarize them. And that opened the door. I started creating a 2 or 3 page summary of the books that he had on his list, and that created the door to open for really rich, great conversations that spun off innovation for me and my career, but also benefits for the organization because of our collaboration. And then over time, we evolved it, and we called it Fireside Chats with Greg, and we would invite other people as we would debate or discuss things that were happening, trends that were coming. So I would encourage you to do something similar to that as you notice what's happening around you. You might even volunteer to do something like that.
Yeah, I think definitely questioning things, but also having potential solutions in hand. So saying, hey, notice this is maybe suboptimal. Here are a couple ways I think we might be able to do it differently. So not just pointing out kind of here are the problems, because I'm sure their manager or management in general knows maybe those are the problems, or even if they don't know, they don't necessarily want to be reminded of it if they don't know how to fix it right then and there. So if you can come to them with an idea, then it's much easier to say, oh, okay, do you want to go try that? Or how could we do that, and really figure out what that could look like.
Thank you. So my question is, what do you think is the key for us non-millennials who have been in the workforce for 30, 40 plus years to shift from that employee mentality to that stakeholder mentality when you've grown up with the 8 to 5, you've grown up with that ethic, that work ethic. So how do you make that switch? You know in your mind, but it's easier said than done is what I'm finding. So curious.
We have to shake ourselves up, don't we? Yeah, we have to begin to ask the question, what triggers me to feel joy? What triggers me to feel excited and passionate? And how can I create more opportunities to do that? We have to stop expecting that salary increases. And in fact, there's a point where I think we need to get to that says, here's in essence what the value of that work is. And if I feel like I'm worth more than that, then I need to go explore other opportunities to continue trying out new things, create a couple of new hobbies and start talking about those regularly in the workplace and see how you can connect the dots around those. I'm such a big believer that we need to be willing to be first-time learners of something. When we turn 50, when we turn 55, I want to be telling stories about the things I'm learning, the things I'm doing for the first time in my life, and not being afraid to not be the expert. You know, you've gotten to a point in your career where you've got 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, of expertise. And that comes with a sense of, I feel really good about knowing what I know. But being willing to say, I don't know how to do this, and I would love to learn how to do this. And constantly, I challenge myself every 90 days to have something new that I'm intentionally learning that I want to go from not knowing much about it to being at the point where I can at least converse about it. This whole thing about mindset shifts and what it means to be a stakeholder in the work, in many ways, it's think of yourself as the owner of whatever your accountabilities are in your organization. Think of yourself as the business owner for that and treat it that way. Treat it like it's your own profit center. And how am I adding enough value here in my organization to continue doing this? Those are at top of mind, but I'd be happy to continue that conversation.
I think you covered it nicely.
All right, so we have time for 1 or 2 more questions if anyone has a burning question they want to ask.
Thank Thank you. Earlier in the presentations, you touched on, a couple of you touched on the extinction of the common review period and kind of doing these monthly, weekly type touch bases. I work for an organization of about 100 people, and it's hard to reassure that those types of conversations are happening. So I guess, you know, Lisa, you might be able to answer this question a little bit better just because of working in a retail space the way you do. How do you reassure that these conversations are happening? Are they informal? Are they formal? Are they documented? And then aside from that, how do merit increases take place? Are they annually occurring still? You know, what is that timeline for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's definitely a challenge to make sure these things are happening for sure. The way that we approach it is by putting the onus on the employee. So the employee is more likely to be like, I want to talk about my development. I'm not getting these conversations. So like, and go to their manager with that. Whereas the manager is less likely to sit down with all of their direct reports. They might have 8 or 10 of them and be like, okay, are you ready for your review? So by putting the ownership on the employee, that's how we try and address that, and having them be accountable. And then in regards to merit increases, right now that process is pretty separate, but it's not completely ironed out in any way. I think it's still a question of just kind of how they all fit together, because it's definitely more challenging when you can't just say, hey, this is exactly how we do it, here's the score, and here's what it translates to. So I think we're still figuring it out.
We're going through this process at SAP, and one of the ways we're holding people accountable is having a survey that goes to employees to say, is your manager having these conversations? And we're kind of putting the onus on both the manager and the employee. Like it's both of you to set up the conversations, make sure they're happening, but then we are asking employees via survey, is the conversation happening? Or are you talking to your manager? So there's feedback that goes directly back to the manager so that they know, okay, we're looking at whether or not these conversations are happening.
In an organization that I work with, there are about, I think, 17 employees. And in essence, we said, this is the base pay. And when you hit these milestone projects, you will receive additional compensation, bonuses, if you will. And so the employee really gets to drive how often those bonuses occur by when they hit the milestone. So compensation begins to change when you put things into key accountabilities and you define very clearly what those timeframes are, and then you set up the comp to match that. So I'm just adding on the part about how do you do merit increases. Having designed several performance management systems for very small organizations where you can't say, let's just automatically give people a 5% increase. We've got to demonstrate that there's been value added and that we're growing the business. And so you say, what are the milestones, the triggers that demonstrate we've grown the business? We add an additional 3 customers, well, then you'll get a bonus that looks like this. We add an additional 8 customers, you get a bonus that looks like this. We deliver this project in this way, then you get da-da-da-da-da. Making sense? Yeah, and you can do that any size company, but it's particularly important for smaller organizations where profit margins are a little tighter.
So we have our last question. It's going to be from Emma, and after that we're going to do the drawing for the prizes.
So in your presentations you touched upon either finding your leaders in some way, or also ideas and innovation can come from sort of the lower employees or just regular employees. So do you see innovation as more of a, a top bottom in which the leaders are the ones coming up with innovative ideas and sort of selling those ideas to employees and employees sort of, reacting to that? Or do you see it more as a bottom up in which these lower employees are actually the ones coming up with innovative ideas? And if it is that bottom up, how are they selling those ideas to these leaders, these executives?
My experience is that it doesn't have to do with top or bottom, that it has to do with being an outsider. So if you're an outsider to a process, if you're an outsider to something, you're more likely to say, that doesn't make sense. Help me understand why we do it that way. And so it's inviting people from other areas without regard to, is this person at the top or is this person at the bottom? Inviting them to come in, to see the process, to explore, and then to ask questions. That's really, I think, part of what drives it. How about you?
I think it's both. I think leaders really set the tone for what the culture is going to be like. If you have leaders acting one way, you can't expect that the people are going to behave differently than that. So you really need a leader that's going to set the tone for that culture of innovation. But it's when the employees feel empowered enough to share that innovation can grow. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So it has to be that safe, open environment where employees can share and to share their ideas.
Yeah, I would agree. It's both. I think you guys said it well. It's just, you need the values and the leadership from the top to be on board, but then you also need the people at the bottom because they probably are the ones that are in the weeds of most of the things that might need some innovation. So I think you need the values and you need the people on the bottom with the ideas.
Thank you very, very much for answering all of our questions. Thank you, everybody, for volunteering your questions.